Here are 3 confusing things God often uses to help you know who He wants you to marry. Number 1, when God reveals the person He wants you to marry, He will let you date this person, but also He will let seasons of doubt occur during your season of dating. Many people use this phrase, the one, in a different way than I use it. When I use this phrase, I'm not referring to a soulmate or the perfect one that will complete you. I'm not saying that everyone can only marry one person, as widows, for example, can remarry. What I'm referring to when I use this phrase, the one, is the person God has planned for you to marry. Yes, you are free to make your own choices, and your personal choices have consequences. But throughout the Bible, there is an undeniable reality that in God's sovereignty, He has a plan and a will that always happens. So, to be theologically consistent, we have to conclude that if God has a will for everything, this everything must also include our relationships. For more on this, you can click the card in the right corner of your screen to watch my video called, What Does the Bible Say About the One? It's important to distinguish this definition of the one because many people feel like when they experience doubt in their season of dating with this person, that this is an automatic sign that this is not the one. So if you're looking for someone to complete you or your soulmate or your other half, you're going to be waiting your entire life because that person doesn't exist. In fact, during the dating season, I believe God often intentionally allows you to have doubts about this person and your future together as a way of bringing you the clarity you desire about this relationship. If you just always felt this person is the one and you never have any doubts, you will often lack the motivation to seek God passionately about His will for this relationship. Then, when hard times come later on, you will wonder if you made a mistake by marrying this person because you didn't diligently seek the Lord's confirmation. But when you experience doubts, this gives you the motivation to passionately seek the Lord's wisdom on His will for your life. And then, once the Lord does give you that clarity that you seek, through His Word, through the Spirit, and through the circumstances in your life, then you'll know that you didn't force this relationship to occur even when times get hard. You will know it was actually God who was the one who led you to marry this person. Notice what it says in Acts 17, verses 11 through 12. Now the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the Scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. As a result, many of them believed, as did also a number of prominent Greek women and many Greek men. When you don't truly study the Scriptures and seek the Lord's wisdom, you end up having issues later on. But when you examine the Scriptures with eagerness and don't just blindly follow what you hope to be true, you end up having a clear faith. This principle applies to relationships too. You have to eagerly seek the Lord's will, and oftentimes you won't do that unless you first have doubts. So to get you to ask the right questions, God often lets you experience doubts so you will come to Him to find the answers He wants to provide you about this person. Number 2, when you meet the one, God will often purposely let this experience be different than the way you dreamed it would be. Life would never have any confusing moments in it if God was in the business of adapting His will to our dreams. But that's not what God does. Therefore, life will often be very confusing. The confusion vanishes, however, when we start intentionally loosening our grip on what we think should happen and start opening our hands to the blessings God has planned to give us. This is one of the reasons God so often lets people's journey towards meeting the one be so different than they imagined. Yes, there are those rare instances where you hear people's story about how they met their spouse in the exact way that they imagined it would occur, but far more often you hear people's stories and you realize they met in ways that they would never have expected. You may think you are going to meet the one at church, but perhaps you meet the one through online dating. You may think you are going to marry someone of a certain race, but God may lead you to marry someone who looks very different than you expected. You may have thought you would marry someone older than you, but perhaps God will lead you to marry someone younger than you. My point is, when you meet this person and start dating this person, it will probably be very confusing along the way because it'll be very different than the way that you imagined it to be. The whole experience just won't match your dream. As Jesus taught us to pray in Matthew 6, 9 through 10, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Jesus taught us that our main priority must be to bring honor to God's name. Prayer is not meant to be a time where we beg God to bring honor to our name. Jesus told us to pray that God's will would be done in our lives, not that we should plead that God would make our will happen in our lives. So when you meet the one, don't expect it to be like you expected. This may be confusing at first, but in the end, you will be grateful you accepted God's plan because it's always better than our plans. And number 3, when you meet the one, God will provide peace in the midst of all the confusion. One thing's for certain, we can't predict the future, nor should we try. It's wise to prepare for the future to the best of our ability. It's wise to look for the evidence God is sending that is meant to let us know what God wants us to do. But in the end, we must always accept that a life lived for God will require a deep faith. If you knew the future, you would not need faith. And if you did not need faith, you would not have opportunities to trust God. So my point is, expect your future, including your relationships in the future, to be confusing. But we must also remember what it says in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 33. God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. Yes, life will be confusing, but when you're following the Lord, His presence in your life will always produce peace. God won't be the one who causes the confusion or causes you to be confused, but He will allow confusion to occur in your life because He wants to give you the opportunity to live by faith in Him. But again, His peace will be present when you are following His path. While we may have hoped that meeting the one would be marked by a total lack of confusion, that's probably not what is going to happen when you truly do meet the one God has for you one day. But if you are following God's will, He will give you peace about it in the midst of the unknowns. For more information on how to know when God is revealing the one, here's a playlist of previous videos I've done on this topic. I'm Mark from ApplyGodsWord.com. I really hope this video was helpful to you and maybe you learned something new. Until next time, God bless.